Before Double Dragon, before Final Fight, there was Renegade. Developed by Technos and published by arcade titans Taito, Renegade set the tone for beat-em-ups of the future. Drawing influences from films like The Warriors, you punch, kick and knee your way through 4 stages, knocking the snot out of street punks who have kidnapped your girlfriend. No surprises with the premise here, but it reflects many of the depictions of street violence from 80s media. Of the series, this is the roughest looking, lacking high-res sprites and has a repetitive music loop lifted from the arcade original. While the sprites may lack detail, they are functional, and the backgrounds are nicely drawn and make a decent representation of the artwork from the arcade game. But what this lacks in presentation, it makes up for in gameplay. And what was a novelty for beat-em-ups at the time, your character is free to move around in a level in 2 dimensions, rather than just scrolling along in one direction on a single plane like in a game like Kung Fu Master. This allows you to separate gang members from the pack and pick them off one by one. Standing still and taking on a group requires lightning reflexes, and you can easily be overwhelmed for making a wrong move. The C64 only usually allowed joysticks to have one fire button input, no matter how many physical buttons it might have had. To mimic the 3-button arcade controls, the coders at Imagine made the 3 top left buttons on the keyboard jump and attack in either direction. This allows for a more intuitive control scheme to counter enemies as they approach, but it also makes it very awkward if you don't play with the keyboard directly in front of you, or if you can't anchor your joystick with the suckers to your desk. For me, once you get used to this setup, it becomes much less likely to misclick the action you want to take, unlike in the upcoming sequels, where reusing the controls might have saved a lot of hassle. Going back to this today, it's easier to come to terms with the shortcomings. Playing 8-bit games and complaining about rudimentary graphics seems churlish, and the control scheme can be remapped to most emulators, although changing it on real hardware isn't usually possible. The action here is fast and frantic, with a stiff, but not impossible, difficulty level. The hit detection is almost spot on. Getting hit first by an enemy is usually your own fault by making a mistake, and not from an unfair AI. There's a nice range of moves available to knock out your opponents. My favourite is kicking enemies off the screen in the first 2 levels. There's a knack to taking out each of the bosses, with the 3rd and 4th bosses considerably harder than the first 2. There's a bit of pattern learning to do here to get past them. What really pushes the action along is a miserly time limit, forcing you to make mistakes as you rush to clear the screen. All in all, Renegade may surprise you in just how quick it runs, with some real satisfaction to be found handing out street justice to the hooligans in the city. Following the success of their arcade conversion, Imagine at that point under the publishing house of Ocean had been given the go-ahead to make their own sequels of Renegade. What they produced became Target Renegade, related to the arcade game in name only. Whether it's a true sequel or not is up for debate, but the series was well loved on the 8-bit systems at least. Target Renegade is fondly remembered by fans of the ZX Spectrum. The C64 version was more of a mixed bag. Gone were the primitive blocky 8-bit sprites of the first game, replaced with high-res, sometimes cartoonish characters that made the game stand out visually. Gone too was the repetitive and eventually irritating music, and in came a great score from Gary Biasillo. With this new polish and striking cover artwork, surely the game would improve on every aspect of the original. Unfortunately, the actual gameplay itself drops a notch or 2 in quality. Playing today, you'll find yourself frustrated with the difficulty. Any mistake in the first level finds you double teamed by the biker gang and soundly beaten with a baseball bat, losing tons of energy before you escape. Endless cycles of punching the same enemy characters over and over again, along with the old bugbear of poor hit detection, leaves you little incentive to push on and see more of the game. Where the previous game had you not only fighting against multiple characters, you also had to race against the clock in what felt like a very miserly time frame to get each level finished. The clock counting down here feels like an irrelevance, each minute of monotonous fighting feeling more like a punishment than fun. Unfortunately, this is one of those cases of style over substance. Even putting on a trainer version to get infinite lives so you can push on to the end feels like a chore. I must have put in some amount of hours into this to get to the 3rd level without cheating back in the day. The obvious trade-off made here is the improvement in graphics at the expense of individual sprites, leaving only 2 enemies on screen at a time. No matter how nicely drawn, it doesn't make up for the dreariness of dispatching them over and over. There's only 1 boss in the entire game, but chances are you won't get to the end to see him without cheating. You're also limited in what attack moves are actually effective. The 2-punch moves are more likely to connect than any other move, and the jumping kick is almost completely useless, missing almost every time you use it. Such poor hit detection in a game like this is criminal, along with the painful difficulty and the monotonous slog, make this a tedious revisit today. And so we are left with the 3rd game. As a very popular series at the time, I narrowly missed out on picking this up when it came out, but I was put off by my disappointment in Target Renegade. And giving it a go now, I think this was for the best. Imagine ran out of ideas and decided that the best thing to do this time was to have your girlfriend captured by time-travelling hoodlums. Surely having an international trip would have been a better idea, with you beating up punks around the countries of the world. It wasn't to be, and you're left punching and kicking dinosaurs, cavemen, mummies, knights and robots. Some of the issues from Target Renegade are carried over here, with a slightly improved hit detection, but not so much that you can rely on your blows landing every time. Enemies swarm about, and there are more of them on screen, so it doesn't feel quite as laborious to get through them, as not every enemy has to be taken out for you to progress. What hasn't changed is the monotonous nature of the game. You're still walking to the right, battering everything that gets in your way, with no bosses to break things up. It certainly plays a lot faster than Target Renegade, but making your attacks still feels clunky, and using the weapons here doesn't seem to give you much of an advantage, and the animation for it is pretty ugly to watch. Once again we have a nice presentation with some varied sprites and backgrounds. The Egyptian level looks like it could be the set of an Iron Maiden tour from their Power Slave era. The music is pretty good too, but these high points aside, the game isn't worth playing through today, even with a trainer on. Inexplicably, there's both a timer for the levels, and you lose energy slowly over time, with the only way to regain it is by defeating enemies. Why there is a need to put 2 pressure mechanics on your progress is only known to the programmers. Taking one enemy out isn't overly difficult, but with so many to plough through and with background objects that kill you outright, it soon becomes irritating and tiresome. I'm not sure who thought this setting was a good idea, but I'm sure they soon regretted their decision once the reviews came in. Best thing to do for this one is to skip through a long play video on YouTube to see the levels, and leave it at that. It's a shame that the series didn't expand on the gameplay of the first game. The sequels really were hampered by trying to fit all the attacks around the one fire button, and some questionable playtesting. You're best sticking to the first game here, and in my opinion it even plays a little better than the original arcade game. Thanks for watching. If you've got any game series you'd like to see me cover, leave a comment below and maybe I'll have a go at it.